The trout barely broke the surface before I yanked it up. A perfect cast, a perfect morning, or so I thought. The slap of fish on metal hadn't even faded before a voice split the calm. Sharp as a cracked whip. That'll be a fine for illegal fishing on community property. I swear, for a second I wondered if the park rangers had traded in their uniforms for neon vests, but no. It was Karen Wigglesworth herself, queen of the HOA, standing there like she'd just discovered gold in my backyard, flanked by 2 patrol officers armed with clipboards and self-importance. Let me back up a sec. This wasn't just any creek. This was the same stretch of water I'd fished with my granddad, the same one that ran smack through the middle of our land. Legacy stuff. Karen, though, she had that look, the one she reserved for HOA meetings and small-town power grabs. She brandished a crumpled paper like it was a declaration of war. Community property, she declared, with her henchmen scribbling away like we were in some backwoods court of law. You know what I mean? I figured it was one of her usual stunts. She'd pulled her weight before, but this was new. I told her straight. Karen, you've lost your mind. The creek's on my deed. She grinned, all venomous sweetness, and pulled out some ancient, blurry map. Not according to this, darling. Historical records say otherwise. Then she waved her walkie-talkie like a sheriff's badge, threatening enforcement procedures. Her patrol guys chimed in, threatening fines and escalation. Honestly, I almost laughed, but the way Karen talked, you'd think she'd already rewritten the law. They marched off, and my morning was shot. I hauled my bucket home, wiped the fish slime from my hands, and dug out the old deed. Yellowed, edges curled, but clear as day. That creek was mine. Always had been. Karen, though, she didn't care about facts if they got in the way of her latest crusade. Ever since she'd muscled her way onto the new Environmental Preservation Subcommittee, she'd been sniffing around everyone's yard, but I never expected her to come for the creek. The next day, the circus was back in town. Plastic fencing, caution signs, and Karen's patrol staked out at the trail. One sat in a folding chair, smirking and marking strikes in his little book. When I called her out, Karen read from her phone like she was reciting the HOA Bible. Temporary restriction pending formal reassignment, she chirped. The sheriff won't intervene in civil disputes. The board backs me, so good luck. Her tune sounded like a victory march, but it only fueled my fire. I called Charlie, my lawyer buddy. That's not just illegal, it's stupid, he said between laughs. But Karen's clever. She'll swamp the county with bogus paperwork. Gather every scrap of proof. So I did, stacking up maps, deeds, family photos, everything. But I knew I couldn't just play defense. My granddad always said, land means nothing if you don't stand up for it. Then came the twist. My neighbor Mara showed up, casserole in hand. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Heard Karen's daughter wants to run guided nature walks, build a trailhead, right through your creek. This isn't about preservation. It's about business. Suddenly, it all clicked. Karen's whole community stewardship act was a smokescreen for her family's side hustle. You gotta love small-town transparency. Fueled by new resolve, I headed back to the creek that evening. The barricade wasn't strong, just loud. That was Karen in a nutshell, wasn't it? I wasn't about to let her win. Next morning, her patrol was out there again, and now they'd brought in a surveyor, neon vest, thick glasses, and a face that said he wanted no part of this. Karen quoted some obscure HOA charter, but when I called her bluff, the surveyor packed up and left, muttering about not getting paid. Enough for trespassing. Word spread fast in our town. At the diner, Jim, the old-timer who never wasted words, slid into my booth. She's got an angle, he said, stirring his coffee. Her daughter needs that creek for ecotourism. No creek, no project. That was all I needed to hear. Back home, I rummaged the attic for my granddad's annotated property map. Mara dropped off a tin box full of old community newsletters and even clearer county maps. Together, these made Karen's flimsy paperwork look like kids' drawings. I sent everything to Charlie, who was practically giddy. This is gold. We'll draft a cease and desist, attach the evidence, and if Karen steps foot on your land again, we'll be ready. But I knew Karen wasn't done. Sure enough, she showed up again with a County Environmental Board rep in tow. I confronted them, made it clear they were trespassing, and the county man quickly realized Karen had oversold her authority. Still, Karen kept pushing. sending her patrol to mark more trees, tag rocks, leave ribbons, upping the ante each time. I threatened legal action. She fired back with slander threats. But her confidence was cracking, her voice a little less certain every time. I kept documenting everything, building my case like I was stacking bricks. Finally, I decided to take it to the sheriff himself. Roy Jenkins, old school, straight shooter. I left a note with his deputy, describing the trespassing, the harassment, the fake claims. Not 2 days later, Roy showed up on my land. Not in a cruiser, but on horseback. His quarter horse, Daisy, chugging down the trail like it was a Wild West movie. Folks gathered to watch, phones out, whispering. Karen was there, too. Her clipboard clutched tight, voice syrupy sweet. But shaking. Roy didn't waste words. Looks like someone's been claiming what isn't theirs. Karen spouted her jargon. Roy just stared her down, then pulled down her entire barricade, tossing it at her feet. If I see another ribbon, I'll have you in the back of my cruiser. The crowd was loving it, some outright laughing when Karen, flustered, caught her boot in the tape and landed backside first in the creek. Her patrol scrambled after her, and Roy deadpanned. Careful, Karen. Wouldn't want the community creek to claim you too. You'd think that would end it. But Karen just shifted tactics, filing complaints with the county, claiming sheriff interference and environmental violations. The paper ran the story. HOA officer declares war on sheriff. It was a punchline by lunchtime. Her own board started distancing themselves. Mara filled me in, grinning. Karen's hosting emergency meetings. Nobody's showing up. Her daughter's project? Dead in the water. A few weeks later, Roy rode by for coffee. County dismissed her complaints, told her the sheriff's department was in the right. He sipped his coffee, gave me some advice. Put up a sign. Let folks know where they stand. So I did. Carved it myself. Private Creek. Sheriff approved. The neighbors loved it. Folks started calling it Sheriff Creek. Karen faded away. Barely seen around town. And that's how it ended. No big courtroom showdown. Just backbone, history, and a little help from a sheriff with a sense of timing. The lesson sticks, sometimes the only thing keeping your story from being rewritten is you refusing to drop the pen. But hey, tell me, was I right to stand my ground, or did I just pour gas on a fire that was bound to burn itself out? Where do you draw the line when the line itself is under attack? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear where you stand when your home's on the line, that if you told me things would quiet down after that, I probably would have believed you. For a while, it almost seemed like we'd found peace. A couple of weeks drifted by, the mornings cool and quiet. The only thing moving down by the creek was the water and the occasional deer. Even the birds sounded happier. The neighbors kept their distance, but when we bumped into each other at the hardware store or the post office, there'd be a little grin, a handshake, a nod toward the trail. Sheriff Creek, huh? And I'd just smile. Folks around here have long memories, but nothing unites a town like seeing the HOA queen take a spill in front of her, resentment floating in the air like pollen. Hard to see, impossible to ignore. Word got around that she was spending more time on the phone than out in the yard, sending emails, gathering sympathy. One muggy evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the sky the color of old whiskey, Mara showed up again, casserole dish in hand. She settled on the porch, scooping us both some of her famous mac and cheese, and leaned in like we were plotting a heist. You hear about the HOA board? She asked. I shook my head. They're holding a closed-door meeting tomorrow. Word is Karen's pushing for a special election to reassert community rights over, you guessed it, water resources. She gave me a look, half exasperated, half amused. Some folks never learn. And right then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed, a new email notification. Subject line, notice of pending action. Sure enough, Karen had forwarded a letter from her attorney, claiming continued obstruction of community development initiatives and warning of potential legal remedies including, but not limited to, injunctive relief. In plain English, she was threatening to drag me into court for defending what was mine. Charlie, my lawyer friend, just laughed when I called him. Let her file, man. The county's already on your side. If she drags this out, it'll only hurt her standing with the board, the neighbors, everyone. But save every email, every letter. Bullies don't quit easy. They just change tactics. The next day, things escalated. Early, before the mist had even burned. all wearing matching blue shirts, hauling lumber and plastic bins down the trail. At the head of it, clipboard in hand, was none other than Karen, barking orders like a drill sergeant. They were marking new stakes, stringing caution tape, measuring out some imaginary public trail. It was almost comical, if it hadn't been so infuriating. I didn't shout, didn't argue. I just pulled out my phone, hit record, and calmly walked up. "You're trespassing again, Karen. The sheriff made it clear. The deed makes it clearer. This land isn't yours, and neither is the creek. You need to leave. Now." She didn't even look up, just waved her clipboard in the air, mumbling about pending litigation. The workers, clearly uncomfortable, started backing up. One or two looked me in the eye, shrugged, and turned back toward their trucks. Karen's hands shook a little. I almost felt sorry for her. An hour later, Roy showed up, this time in his cruiser, boots dusty, hat low. He surveyed the scene, then turned to Karen. "You've been warned," he said, low and tired. "Next time, it's not just a warning." She tried to protest, but Roy just shook his head and pointed up the trail. "Go home, Karen." By then, the whole town was buzzing again. The diner was packed that evening, the air thick with opinions, stories, and the kind of gossip that always finds its way to the right ears. Some folks were tired of the drama, just wanted peace. Others saw it as a showdown, old-timers versus newcomers, land rights versus progress. And me? I was just tired, but I knew I couldn't blink first. Not when it came to family, legacy, and principle. That weekend brought the twist I never saw coming. A knock at the door, this time not Mara, not the sheriff, but Vincent, the quietest board member, holding a battered manila envelope. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, sliding it across the kitchen table. Inside, letters, handwritten, typewritten, some yellowed with age, all from neighbors, past and present, documenting their own property lines, their dealings with the creek, even a note from a county surveyor, dated 1972, confirming my family's claim. Turns out, Vincent and a few others were quietly rooting for me all along. Karen's made herself enough enemies. The board's voting next week. She's not going to like the result. For the first time in weeks, I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, this would finally end. Monday came, and with it, the board meeting. I didn't go, didn't need to. Word filtered back by dinner time. Karen had been stripped of her subcommittee, her environmental stewardship plan scrapped for good. Her daughter packed up and left, the ecotourism dream gone with her. Even her most loyal allies started to drift away. Funny how power works in small towns. One minute you're untouchable, the next you're sitting alone at the end of the bar. But Karen? She still wasn't done, not really. 2 days after the meeting, a for sale sign went up in her front yard. Mara called me, laughter in her voice. Guess she's heading back to the city. The grapevine says she's blaming the whole thing on small-minded locals and backward thinking. Maybe she's right. Or maybe she just learned the hard way that you can't bulldoze your way through history, through family, through a community that actually remembers who owned what and why it matters. So now, the trail's clear. The creek runs free. Some mornings, I find neighbors fishing. Again, sometimes with their grandkids, telling stories that sound a lot like the ones my granddad told me. Sheriff Roy still rides by every so often, tips his hat, asks if the fish are biting. I hang out on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the world right itself after months of being upside down. And yet, I still check the mailbox, still keep that folder labeled Karen's Crusade. Just in case history tries to repeat itself. You can't be too careful these days. There's always another Karen out there, waiting to make your land her next community initiative. But this time, I'm ready, and I'm not the only one. So, let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have fought back, or just let it go? Is it worth standing your ground, even when the world keeps telling you to think of the greater good? Or is it just stubbornness, plain and simple? Drop your take in the comments. I want to hear your stories, your battles, your victories, and your losses. Because in the end, every little creek has a story, and sometimes the only way to protect it is to make damn sure yours is heard.